let's talk about weight. This is gonna be a quick one. So the weight. I think this is one of the more kind of abstract and difficult things to get right. And as you do more stuff and more designs and more repetitions, you will get better at it. Here are some examples that I thought would demonstrate well what I mean by weight. So when you design something, you want to make sure that when the people look at it, they can kind of gauge that is it a heavy thing? Is it not a heavy thing? Is it light? Is it agile? So if it's a plane, you streamline it, it looks fast. If it's in this case, we have this like big Caterpillar dump truck. Just due to its sheer size, you can tell that it has a lot of weight. Whereas this guy, it's much smaller, so it's probably lighter. But we can further reinforce the weight aspect by doing, or like not by doing, by controlling the thickness of the panels of the parts of our design. So common thing I see in the designs of many people is everything's too big, too thick, too massive, oversized, because people think that it's not going to work in real world or it looks flimsy, when in reality a lot of stuff in real life is very thin. You can look at like, I don't know, look at your chair, like or if you just look at the generic chair, you can see how thin the legs are compared to like what it can actually hold in weight. Or if you look at the tower cranes or any other crane, you can kind of see like how thin the cables are, but how much weight they can carry. And humans are not really good with understanding with like that stuff. We're not evolved to understand that steel is really structurally strong. Like a small amount of steel or carbon fiber is incredibly strong, and you don't need a lot of that. And the reason why I have this Baja truck is you can see, for example, so this I think it's either fiberglass or carbon fiber shell. I think it's fiberglass. I'm not sure. It's very thin. Everything feels almost fake because it is. It needs to be lightweight. So it doesn't have like thick armored panels or something. It's just like a thin sheet of fiberglass that weighs very little, but resembles like a Ford truck somehow. And we can do the same in our design. If we're designing a vehicle, if it's, let's say, non-armored, don't make the panels unnecessarily thick. Do add some thickness, but don't make them huge. Another example here, the roll cage, right? It's not a terribly large tube. It's, in the context of this entire vehicle, it's pretty thin. Here on the back, we can see again, it's got some more roll bars and roll cages, and it's not super massive because it doesn't need to be. So this is something to be very mindful of when you're designing. Like here's another example, is this little piston that holds this clamp that holds the spare tires. It's not super big. I've seen a lot of the times in concept art where in situation like this, the piston would be kind of the same size as the piston you would use to like hold a 100-ton crane, right? So if you want to make stuff a bit more realistic, look at the real world, look at the size of the components, look at the thickness and just like the scale, and try to apply it to your work. Alternatively, you can make things over exaggerated. You can make big, large components, big tubes, and add more style to your work that way. Nothing's wrong with that. But if you want to make it a bit more realistic, pay attention to that. And that will, in turn, inform the visual weight of your design. So very helpful tool, like the thickness of the panel, the thickness of pretty much everything you do. I'm always thinking about it. Here's, let's get back to this big truck. It needs to carry like, I don't know, probably hundreds of tons of rocks and soil and dirt and stuff. And look at the size of these reinforced beams. They're massive, right? They absolutely huge. And when we look at it, we're like, oh, wow, this thing can probably carry a lot of stuff. And yeah. So when you're designing something heavy, let's say you're designing a big spaceship, you can look at this and like, okay, if let's just say we're designing a spaceship that re-enters the atmosphere, something very huge, it will probably have a lot of stress on it. It will probably need to be like very heavily reinforced. So you can look at stuff like this and be like, wow, if this thing needs these kind of beams, so like the spaceship probably needs even more. And all of this combined just gives the design a lot of weight, like a lot of weight, a lot of scale. Here scale works really well as well because of the railings. So you have a railing that's very thin, you have the ladder that's very thin, and it's a very obvious human reference versus these massive beams that tell us that like, okay, this thing is super huge. So in order to make something feel big, you need to put something small next to it, and usually it's a person, but in this case a ladder works really well. So I guess this is not only about the weight but also scale. So hopefully that helps, and always be mindful about the thickness of the things, the scale, and how they relate to each other, because you can control it and you can make your design lighter or heavier, and through time and repetition you will get better at it. Here's another example of light versus heavy. So if you look at the tank, you can very clear look at the thickness of these welded parts. Like everything is huge. Even this simple, I don't know what these are, massive, right? Everything has like thickness to it. Look at this piece. It's huge. And here on this side, we have another example of how thickness can be used to inform the weight or even the function of the thing. In this case, we have the hull of F-35, and you can see how all the panels are super thin. Even this structural kind of bulkhead panel inside is very thin, thin ribbing. Everything has kind of weight reduction applied to it, like the thickness of stuff. Like this panel is very thin. And this reference in particular is very interesting because it has a lot of contrast, where you have this plane that has its big, like as in like its volume, but a lot of the paneling is very thin, versus this I don't know what it is, like a forklift frame holding thing, is small in volume, but everything is very thick. Look at these pillars. They look like they can carry a small house, right? So be very mindful about the thickness of things on your references, and when you design, be mindful about how you present your shapes. So if you have like let's say you have an opening, you have a design with like a panel like this, it's open. Well, let's just say like this. You can make a decision where this is, much thicker, like that. And if you apply that over the entire design, right? So thin, not thin. If you apply that over the entire design, your whole, in this case, aircraft will feel much heavier than it probably should be, unless it's your goal. If you want to stylize it to be much bigger or like heavier, or it's the project demands something where it's like big and bulky and stylized, then by all means use that to your advantage in that case as well. But this is something I'm always very mindful about when I design stuff, and it's something that always poses a challenge. It's stuff that I redesign very often, where I would make something and it just looks too bulky, or it's like too thin and too flimsy, and finding that right balance is always a challenge. But through enough repetitions, through enough experience, you will train your eye to kind of see what needs to be what thickness, and just grabbing references and analyzing them like that really helps. So I highly recommend you do that as well.